Welcome to the Bible series, Spring of 2021, from St. Colette Parish. My name is Dick Wright, and we now begin the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the dates you see there are the dates they were found, 1947 to 1954, and then again in 2017. This is a topic that is very interesting to those who want a little more background into the Jewish communities at the time of Jesus. The best word to describe the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls is serendipity. It happened by chance. There was a Jewish sect called the Essenes. We will cover that in a bit, Essenes, which had been around for many years. But they were unknown. It's only when they moved to a location called Qumran, which we'll take a look at, that they came into the picture. Qumran is the site in Israel around which the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. The Qumran community was one of the Jewish communities. There were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, and the Essenes. It was a closed settlement, having little contact with outsiders. They did not want contact with outsiders. Qumran is a site designed for the activities the community undertook. And the rooms which were there, which could not be used as bedrooms, because there were not enough of them to accommodate the full membership. You see the location of the Qumran site. It's on the west bank, west of the Dead Sea. It's east of Jerusalem, south of Jericho, and north of Masada. We'll talk about Masada a little later. Qumran today is in ruins. It's famous only because of its proximity to the caves in which the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. It's remarkable because without that association, it would not have attracted much attention. But even though it's small and unimpressive, It's in stark contrast to Herod's visually stunning palace at Masada. Life at Qumran. They typically had 150 to 200 members, where they slept, when they ate, arose, prayed, labored, bathed ritually, and dined. Agriculture, they were involved in agriculture. They manufactured baskets, textiles, parchment, and pottery, and they collected coins. Coins probably being the deposits of the personal wealth of the individuals who joined the sect. The blueprint of Qumran you'll see on the next page. Remember, it's a work site, not a dwelling place. In the upper left, you see an aqueduct, a man-made aqueduct that brought water to the monastery. The water went to the cistern, which is on the left-hand side, as well as to the garden. The cistern is where the community had ritual bathings. The tower in the upper center was tall enough to be able to see in all directions, so they could not be surprised by enemies, many of whom they had. There's a kitchen in the upper right, a larder in the lower right, a refectory right above the larder, and a scriptorium between the larder and the kitchen. The scriptorium had individual tables and inkwells, because the main duty of those in the Qumran community was very much like the Irish monks who developed the Book of Kells. The monastery layout, we referred to the refectory, larder, and kitchen. The refectory also served as a meeting room. There's a potter's workshop. A number of the members engaged in making pottery for their own use and for outside sale. The scriptorium, as I mentioned, writing tables and inkwells. The storerooms contained 3 vessels with more than 500 coins, which we referred to. And the aqueduct, cisterns, and pools, the fresh water obtained from Wadi Qumran, which was a crease in the earth, was purposely diverted into channels that flowed into the bathing pool and the cisterns, and the tower, as we discussed. Qumran was a unique community. It was their temple, with each member being a priest. And so you see, it's very different from the other communities, the scribes, the Pharisees, who believed in the temple in Jerusalem and worshiped in the temple at Jerusalem. Some very important characteristics. They separated themselves, they considered themselves God's elect. They were apocalyptic, which meant they believed the end of days and the Messianic era were imminent, would be coming very soon. They anticipated the arrival of two messiahs, a royal Messiah and a priestly Messiah. They believed in predeterminism. God preordained victory for them, as they call themselves, the sons of light. They were established by original priests at the temple, Zadokite priests, whom they dispossessed. They considered Jerusalem priesthood and temple illegitimate, impure, and polluted. They maintained the highest level of purity, pure food and drink. They wore white garments. They considered their communal meals as a substitute for Jerusalem temple sacrifices. And they expected that one day they would regain control of the Jerusalem temple. The Dead Sea Scrolls opened new avenues of exploration. The desire to reach back to basic truth, characteristic of our age, has included the domain of religious thought and behavior, and with it, in the Western world, the whole subject of Judeo-Christian culture and spirituality. Compared with the ultra-conservative rigidity of the Essene rule, Rabbinic Judaism reveals itself as progressive and flexible, while the religion preached and practiced by Jesus of Nazareth stands out as invested with religious individuality and actuality. Yet the common ground from which all these Jewish sects sprang was the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Qumran, let's compare the Qumran sect specifically to the early Christians. Similarities compared to the Christians. Qumran utilized a Pesher interpretation. Pesher meaning a method which disregards the original historical context of the writings and instead understands the ancient text as speaking to the present. It basically makes the ancient text obsolete. They used the book of Habakkuk and identified a single individual through whom faith is directed. The Essenes called that person the teacher, and the Christians called that person Jesus the Messiah. The Sons of Light is one of their self-designations. We see that used in the War Scroll, which we'll cover, as well as the New Testament in John and in 1 Thessalonians, which refer to the Christians as sons of light. The Psalms, Deuteronomy, and Isaiah were the most cited Old Testament books in both Christianity and with the Essenes. Further similarities: they saw revelation continuing to take place. The Temple Scroll, which we'll refer to, and the New Testament. There was an initiation rite consisting of ritual immersion with the Essenes and baptism for the Christians, which removed moral uncleanness. Their communal life had the same type of leader, a mevaker or overseer at Qumran, an episkopos or bishop in Christian communities. Both expressed an apocalyptic view. Apocalypticism, which involved a cataclysmic battle, as portrayed in the War Scroll and the book of Revelation. Jesus himself was an apocalypticist. Differences from the early Christians. The Christian movement was much more focused on the Messiah than the Qumran sect. The Qumran sect, as we said, was very insular, while the Christian movement had very active outreach throughout the Mediterranean. The Qumran sect applied the strictest interpretation of Jewish law, called halakha. By contrast, the Christian movement relaxed Jewish law as much as possible. But again, remember, the Christian movement did not eliminate Jewish law, but reinterpreted it. Why are there similar views among the Essenes and the Christians? Very likely it's because of John the Baptist, who likely had contact with Qumran. In Mark 4, 1-6 and Matthew 3, 1-6, John is portrayed as active in the desert region of Judah, baptizing in the Jordan. And geography indicates this is the lower Jordan Valley, not far from Qumran. In Matthew 3:7, John castigates the Pharisees and Sadducees, the same attitude found in the scrolls. While the vast majority of scrolls came from a century earlier than John the Baptist, the Qumran community continued residing in this area well into the 1st century of the Common Era. Did the Essenes inhabit Qumran? Many scholars think so. However, nowhere in the scrolls are the Essenes mentioned, nor are the Essenes mentioned in the New Testament or in the Talmud, the first 5 books of the Jewish Bible. Information, however, about the Essenes comes from writings of outsiders, 3 Greek and Latin authors, without a religious inclination. Philo Judaeus, a Hellenistic Jewish philosopher living in Egypt. Pliny the Elder, a Roman who discussed the Essenes. And Flavius Josephus, a Jewish historian who settled in Rome. Let's take them each in turn. Philo Judaeus lived in Alexandria, was a Jewish philosopher. He was a great admirer of Jewish sects, which had an ascetic lifestyle, as did the Essenes. 2 of his books give information on the Essenes, Every Good Man is Free and Hypothetica. His information corresponds with that of Josephus, but is less specific. And it's unclear whether he ever visited Judea or had first-hand knowledge of the Essenes. Pliny the Elder was a Roman geographer and naturalist who likely had no first-hand knowledge of the Essenes. His book, Natural History, contains information about the location of the Essene settlement, not provided by the other 2 writers. Pliny included highlights such as the Essenes living without women, renouncing love entirely, and living without money. His details are confusing, but most scholars identify Qumran as the Essene settlement he described. And further, archaeological evidence supports this identification. Flavius Josephus was a Jew from a priestly family in Jerusalem who moved to Rome in 67 of the Common Era and wrote Jewish history. His work, The Jewish War, provides a detailed description of the Essenes as the most marginal of Jewish sects. He also admired the Essenes for their asceticism. He entertained as a writer. He wrote for an audience who read history for fun. He claimed he had personal acquaintance with the Essenes, but his information, as well as archaeological evidence, suggest he accurately described the Qumran community. Thank you very much for joining me. The next session will continue with the Dead Sea Scrolls.